It's day 7 of Lions training camp, and things dialed back a little bit when it comes down to the intensity, but there's still plenty of good observations to come from the day. Let's talk about that and a whole lot more, starting right now. What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. My name is Miko, and in today's video, we are once again going to be continuing our training camp recap series, where we basically break down some of the biggest news and observations to come out from the Detroit Lions practices that they are having as they prepare for the 2024 season. Now, this is your first training camp recap video that you have watched over on the POD channel. It's important to know that these are shorter recaps and that we're not necessarily going through every single aspect of practice, but just a couple of the major storylines that have stood out from the day. If you do want that next level of insight, I highly suggest that you subscribe to Pride of Detroit Direct, which is a paid subscription, and you can get a first-hand account of practice from Jeremy and Eric, who are there in Allen Park and have a much more detailed approach to breaking down practice, where they will highlight not only certain players, but various aspects, matchups and things like that that are occurring at training camp. So with that said, let's dive into some of the things that took place at training camp today. And after having a couple days of very intense practices in pads, the Lions decided to scale things back. Now, I think this was probably something that was already baked into their schedule to kind of have an easier day once they started to ramp up this physicality. I do know that the Lions did had a couple players sustain some injuries yesterday, but I don't think them choosing to, kind of take their foot off the gas has anything directly to do with that. I do, in fact, believe that they were just trying to, find some opportunities to rest some guys, which is something that they actually did today. Most of their starting offensive line did not practice today, the lone exception being Penei Sewell. So I think, like I said, with the Lions knowing that they have such a long season ahead of them, plus coming off of a fairly long season, it does do them a pretty good benefit to start to rest as many of their players as they can and not have them have too many of these dog days one after the other. The Lions will be in pads tomorrow, though. So again, this is just like a short break in that intensity, but the Lions still did go through a walkthrough, and there were still things to glean from that walkthrough. Let's go over to the defensive side, where I think one of the biggest things that a lot of people have probably been waiting for, and that was the return of Brian Branch on the field. And not to say that he's just now returning. He has been on the field in limited capacity since training camp kicked off, but because today was a walkthrough, we got to see a lot more of him, specifically at that safety role, which the Lions have been very open about, that this is going to be part of the transition of Brian Branch, maybe taking less work at the nickel spot, and again, taking on a load when it comes down to playing safety next to Kirby Joseph. And that's essentially what we saw today in a lot of the walkthroughs that they were going through, that Brian Branch wasn't really coming off the field. And so I know for me personally, this was something that I wasn't quite sure, if the Lions would fully commit to him playing safety based off of, one, how well he played at nickel last year. And I think that he has all the ability to be an all-pro nickel if the Lions so chose to play him there, but also because of like the emergence of an Ifeatu Melifonwu. I know it was a really small sample size, but it was a really impressive sample size from Iffy during the later stretches of the season last year. So the fact that they want to play Brian Branch there isn't necessarily a surprise, but I think it definitely gives Branch more opportunities to first and foremost make plays and just to continue to keep him on the field longer. Because if he's playing safety, you don't have to worry about in the situations where maybe if you want to go to maybe a 3 linebacker look and maybe having to take him off the field, you can always kind of just have him a little bit more readily available. And it's worth noting that, like I said, while Brian Branch has been heavily a part of walkthroughs, he's been kind of limited in some of the team drills and hasn't been taking part in like the last couple days when it came down to, live tackling, things like that. It is being reported that he should be in pads tomorrow. So that's actually another thing to really look forward to and seeing, how he's moving around, how involved the Lions decide to have him be, if it is going to be, in fact, a full go and he gets to do all of the things, including tackling and things like that, or if they're still going to take it pretty slow with him, because as we know, the Lions are going to need him once the season actually kicks off. Now, Brian Branch isn't the only second-year defender that is worth talking about in today's video. Over the last few recaps, we've been heavily discussing Levi Onwuzurike and just how impressive he's been in each of these practices, dating all the way back to the spring. But today I did want to highlight the fact of, Broderick Martin actually getting some work with the first team, primarily when the Lions go to this four-man front and they need a nose tackle to be in that lineup. I know there was somebody that had a question in the comment section in one of our previous recaps that had a very good question, which was like, hey, if DJ Reader's not ready to start the season, who do the Lions turn to kind of fill that void? Would it be Broderick Martin? Would it be Levi Onwuzurike? And based off all the hype we were getting initially, I was very much confident in saying like, oh, Levi is probably the guy that they would look to put next to Aleem, given a situation where they needed to replace DJ Reader's production or his play. But it does seem like the Lions are willing to diversify that lineup depending on what kind of front they are in. So again, if they're in a four-man front and they need a nose tackle and they want somebody that can be big and stout in the middle, they're choosing to go with Broderick Martin over the likes of a Levi Onwuzurike. And instead of even putting Aleem in that situation to just play like a smaller nose, they are instead choosing to use the big body. But if they're going to more of those five-man fronts, that is when we're seeing Levi Onwuzurike kind of get on the field, and you're starting to see, a lot more of him. But to really focus on Broderick in this situation, like I think this is a really good vote of confidence for him. And I've kind of been saying, leading up into training camp that I think he's one of those players along with Levi that should expect more opportunities once the season kicks off. Last year, the Lions had a couple other defensive tackles that they just felt a little more confident in. When you talk about the likes of Benito Jones, they even tried mixing in Isaiah Buggs a little bit. They tried a couple different things when it came down to that defensive tackle position, and that led to us not seeing a lot of Broderick Martin last year. But again, while he's still learning and developing his game, it is at least evident that the Lions are at least willing to trust him and get him next to some of these other established players and allow the work that Terrell Williams has been putting in with that entire group to kind of shine. So while, it's not him available on every single down, it is at least something worth noting out that, the Lions are trusting Broderick Martin in certain situations to be in that starting. Now, jumping over to the offensive side, like I said, because it was a walkthrough day, there's not really like anything big to take away because, again, it is at a slower pace with less intensity. But I think one thing to be noted that we've talked about a little bit in some of these recaps is just the wide receiver battle and where that currently stands. Now, obviously, the Lions are already very comfortable with the fact that they have an Amon-Ra St. Brown, they have Jamison Williams, they have Khalif Raymond. But that next wide receiver spot, or at least, when it comes down to that X position, it's been a little bit of a toss-up. We've seen them try out Antoine Green there, and he's been getting a lot of work with the first team. We've also seen Daurice Fountain get a lot of work and kind of be that guy that really is starting to kind of push the pace and be one of those guys that is getting a consistent mix with the first team just as well as Antoine Green. So with those two guys leading the pack, plus you're sprinkling in Khalif Raymond as well as someone that clearly has a role on this team, it really kind of puts Donovan Peoples-Jones a little bit on the outside. And there hasn't been that many opportunities so far in training camp for him to get work with the first team. He's definitely getting still involved, and they definitely, I'm sure, still like him as a player. But I think it really speaks to, one, the play that Antoine Green and Daurice Fountain have kind of, elevated and kind of pushed. And maybe, Donovan Peoples-Jones isn't quite, differentiating himself enough in just his skill set overall. I still think, he does have some versatility, both as obviously a big wide receiver, and he does have some special teams versatility. But as far as when, the Lions are going out there and they're having 7-on-7s or they're having their 11-on-11 type situations, it is typically Antoine Green, Daurice Fountain, or actually I should say Daurice Fountain, even sometimes in front of Antoine Green, and then Antoine Green, and then DPJ is kind of the odd man out in a lot of these situations. Obviously, he's the veteran. He has a lot of experience. And so we're going to have to kind of wait to see, again, as training camp continues to progress. And once they kind of get into these preseason games, can he make a big enough splash? Can he differentiate himself enough? Because, again, as great as it is to be standing out in practice, you have to be able to also do it in games. And that's something that Donovan Peoples-Jones at least has under his belt, is that he's been productive in games when he's been in the NFL. Again, it's nothing that to necessarily buy too much into, but it is something worth noting that, again, when it comes down to that third or fourth wide receiver spot, that competition is very, very tight as we stand today. So with that said, guys, that's pretty much going to do it for today's training camp recap. Like I said, it's a little bit on the shorter side, but it is because, like, again, it was a walkthrough day and there wasn't a whole lot to take away from the day, but there is some additional tidbits that you can find if you're subscribed to Pride of Detroit Direct. So again, if you're looking for a little more insight, I definitely, suggest you do that. You can also check out the article that Eric is going to have posted on the Pride of Detroit website, where he breaks down practice a little bit more in just a written format. So if that's more of your speed, definitely check out that article over on prideofdetroit.com. But if you're looking for any more content, if you want to stay tuned into what we are doing over here on YouTube, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and that is going to keep you tuned into any new videos that we upload over here on YouTube. So with all that said, I'm Miko. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.